Hello, this is the Research Methods video on observations. If I can just remind you as you listen to this video to write the Cornell notes as best you can and also answer the questions that I'll ask as we go through the video. Once you've finished, write this up as neatly as you can into your mind map and have a little look through some of the additional textbooks. Okay, let's have a little look at some of these different observation types. There'll be 8 altogether, and some of them are effectively the opposite of the previous one. This will make sense as we go along. Okay, so observation. Clearly, I mean, just generally, this is watching people's behaviour and recording it down. Our first type will be a naturalistic observation. So a naturalistic observation is where we will go to the people being observed and we will watch them in their own settings, either in their home or place of work. Some good things about this is there is high external validity. If you go and you watch someone in their natural environment, chances are they are going to behave in that natural environment the same as others, and you can generalize your findings a bit better. Problem with this, though, if you are going to go and see them in a natural setting, it might be that things unexpected can turn up and extraneous variables can sneak in, meaning that you've got quite low control over what happens. Now, the flip side of a naturalistic observation is a controlled observation. So a controlled observation is where perhaps they'll come to you, they'll do an activity, you'll perhaps vary some aspect of what they're doing, and then you'll record their behaviors. So an example of a controlled observation would be Bandora's study on children, where they put them in with the Bobo doll. So that was a very clearly controlled observation, and also Ainsworth's strange situation as well. Okay, so we can see here our evaluations are the flip reverse of a naturalistic observation. Because we've got them in a place we're able to see them quite clearly, you can control everything that happens to them. You can control the materials, you control every aspect of what's around them. The problem with this, of course, though, as you've taken them to a novel environment, you might be able to argue that it has low external validity. They may have behaved very differently in this controlled environment than they would in day-to-day life. Okay, overt. This is where participants will know that they're being observed. You'll be stood there with a clipboard and they can see you right there, and they know what's going on. Now you can straight away think of some downsides to this. If you know you're being observed and you can figure out why you're being observed, you might switch your behavior to match what you think the observer wants to see. So this is a demand characteristic, and that's the big problem you've got with overt observations. The good thing about it is, you kind of want to know if someone's watching you. So we can say that it's more ethical to have an overt observation, because people will know you're there and can consent to being observed. So of course, the flip from an overt observation would be a covert observation. So this is where participants wouldn't know they're being observed. In this situation, because they don't know they're being observed, they're far less likely, well, they wouldn't, unless they spot you, alter their behavior to match the expectations of the observer. So we don't have any demand characteristics in this situation, as long as we haven't manipulated the situation in some way. Our big problem with this, though, is it's highly unethical to observe someone without their knowledge, which kind of means without their consent. So, another 2. Participants. This is where you would join the group that you're observing. Now this could be overt or covert, but in some way you're sat with the group and you're maybe getting involved with the activities, and you're kind of embedded within them. This is quite an interesting experience from the perspective of the other participants, because they are going to open up perhaps a lot more on the way that they are behaving around you. They might behave more naturally around you because you're getting involved as well, and you might be able to pick up quite a lot of things from a rapport that you would build up with the other people that you're observing. The downside to this, though, is if you are going to embed yourself so deeply within a group. You could start finding yourself taking on board some of their opinions about why they're there and what they're doing. Now, as a researcher, you want to be objective. You want to see things without bias. You want to see things as clearly as you can, without kind of being led one way or another. So we could argue that if you take part in a participant observation, your judgment can become cloud, and we can argue there's a lack of there is researcher bias there. So our other option is a non-participant observation, where you'd stand away from the group, maybe watch them get involved in an activity and take some notes a little bit away. Our downside to this is, well, actually, if we're not getting involved in the activity and we're not embedding ourselves, we would lack obviously that rapport, and we might lose some of the details that we might have gained if we were a little bit closer to the action. We might lose some insights. But on the positive, we hopefully would be able to keep a little bit more objectivity by standing further away from the group and not getting so involved. So another type of observation would be an unstructured observation. This is where we would just turn up and we would just write down everything that we could. We can't write down actually all the behaviour because so much might be going on at any stage, but we would just watch what's going on around us and write down what we found was the most interesting and most important. So we could get a lot of detail by going into an observation and just recording everything we possibly could. We could perhaps set up a camera and record everything, or an audio recording. Problem is, even with those techniques, it is difficult to get every bit of data that's there. Sometimes we might be so swamped with detail as well, it's hard to pick out the important things that we need to be looking out for. Okay, so our other option is to have a structured system. So we actually put something in place in order to record the behaviors that we are going to be identifying as a priority. So this is quite handy. So when we come away from the observation and we've got a list of behaviors that we've observed, we can then into kind of we can quantify what we found, and then we can go and analyze the data we've got in the form of numbers and put this into graphs, charts and tables and that kind of stuff. Downside to this, so if you are going to structure your observation to look at just a very few types of behavior, we might miss some really interesting things that go on. We might see it and go, you know what, that's just not what I'm looking for, I'm going to not record that, and then we could lose some valuable insights. Let's just drill down on this idea of a structured observation a little bit more, because there's some different ways we could structure. So what we'd want to do before we go into any observation which is structured is we're going to want to identify some behavioural categories. So this is an important key term, behavioural categories. This is countable behaviours. So we need to really think before we go in, well, what might we see? And we can't just be very vague about this. We can't say, oh, well, we're going to watch people doing a presentation, we're going to look for shyness or awkwardness. That's just far too vague. We need to identify things that we can measure, things that we can tick off in a little table. So we might want to measure in a presentation the number of times they cross their arms, the number of times they break eye contact, the number of times they stumble over their words, and those things we can objectively measure and then check against someone else's recording of them. Okay, so once we've identified our behavioural categories, we need to think of a way to record them. So our sampling technique of we're sat here watching an observation can come down in two main ways. So we might have an event sampling. So we might have these behavioural categories listed out and we have them in a tally chart and we just tick them off as we see them. So we just maybe watch one individual and the number of times these behaviours happen with this individual, we'll tick them off. So per event. Whereas there's something else we could do as well. We could do time-based sampling. So what we could do is we could say, every 30 seconds, I'm going to write everything that I've just seen. That's happening at that moment. And we wait another 30 seconds, well, what do we see now? Or maybe it can be every 5 minutes. We can wait that time, I'll record what's happening at this moment, and then on. So two very different ways of recording behaviours, linked differently to structured and unstructured observation. Okay, a couple of questions for you to prefer before you come into class. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to come up with, let's say, 3 observations that are either naturalistic, controlled, overt, covert, participant, non-participant, structured, unstructured. I want you to find these outside of what we've already covered in psychology. So have a little Google, try and find some interesting observations for me, and I'll ask for 3 of those in class. Thank you very much.